Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here is my outdoor worm bag. It's two bags actually, but I call it my outdoor worm bag. And the reason it sits in this trash pail here is that it's actually sitting up on top of a little plywood platform I made for it. It sits right about here, under which I've got an upside down pot holding it up, because this way, even though there's holes on the bottom of this container, like intruders could easily get in, or if this thing was resting straight on the ground, intruders could get in and, you know, ransack the worm population in here. So I'm protecting that from happening by keeping it up like this, and it seems like it's been working pretty good. It's been a week since we last checked in on this bin to feed it, and today I'm coming back in here once again to feed. Last week, besides the feeding, we also added a whole bunch of extra worms that we recruited out of my compost barrel. So last time we went from an estimated 2,200 worm population in here to something closer to 3,000 at this point. I've been averaging everyone's estimated suggested worm counts, and with that averaged formula, I believe it calculates out to a population of 2,907 worms populating this system right here. That's the calculated value. I've got some stuff for the feeding here. I got my little box that I keep the bedding in. I bought some shredded paper here too, so besides leaves there's also shredded paper in that box. I believe some tubes too. Yeah, I bought some tubes down too. These are some tomatoes that have been sitting around inside for way too long now, and I got some new ones I've got to take off the plant, so I'm gonna send these kind of nasty ones into the worm bin as food. And to help out with the digestion of that food, they're getting some of this pulverized eggshell here as well. So let's make a little bit of room on this table to rest the camera down, and then we could get to work. The last time we were in here, it was a drizzly day, and this piece of paper was pretty damp and very fragile, but when it dries out, it's holding up quite well, despite the holes that have been chewed into it. And since like today's diet with tomatoes, this bin does often get tomatoes, and the tomato seeds like to germinate very readily. You know, when I watched last week's video, it did somehow seem to me like there's just a very I don't know, scarce amount of bedding material in here. There's a little bit of leafy stuff scattered across the top, but when you start going through the material in here, it does seem very dense in compost. And it's true that every time I recruit worms and bring new worms in, I also bring with them a whole pile of already composted material, or pretty close to being fully composted material. So that kind of brings the appearance of a fairly young bin like this up to looking a lot more mature somehow in a lot less time. So even though it looks like, wow, look at all those castings, you know, those are just the castings that came over with the worms that we bought in here. If it was just a bin started with worms only, you know, like a freshly built bin, this would be mostly bedding still at this point, with maybe just some signs of castings, you know, appearing. I'm trying to remember what we fed last time too. I did, like I said, I did watch the video last time to, you know, see what the material looked like. Might be very similar to what they're getting today, which is the coffee and the tomatoes. But before we put this stuff in, I'm going to get the bedding. The bedding is quite a bit, you know, so I thought that, well, let's just see. I'm gonna maybe just dump it all straight in and see what it looks like. I guess since it is a lot of this flyaway sort of paper, it would be best to make sure we submerge it all. My hope with the leaves being all mingled in here too is that it, you know, prevents the paper from matting up and becoming just a big clump. But, you know, you do what you can. It's going to happen one way or another. If you could just minimize it, it might, you know, help speed the breakdown process a bit. At least that's the way I see it. Alright, so we could pile in today's food. Pretty generous feeding, but I mean, a population of close to 3,000 worms probably could use the nourishment, especially when you come in here after a week and not even see any signs of the previous feeding. So it does seem like they're doing away with whatever they're given. A few cherry tomatoes. I think when I go pick some fresh tomatoes off the plant. There's probably going to be a bunch that have been resting on the ground already. I usually take, you know, a good amount of care to pull all the fruit off the plant before it starts just dropping them on the ground, but lately I just haven't been keeping up quite as much as I usually do. Alright, I just wanted to squish these tomatoes a little bit, let their juices start flowing into this dry bedding that we dropped on here. Before we pop in the coffee, we're going to give it some of this grit here. I probably got enough to save for one more application. I set this stuff aside because it's a little bit rougher than the stuff I usually use down in my wormery, because it's not just the eggshell, but it's some of that loose stuff that kind of blows away in the breeze when you that stuff that lifts up off the ground and floats in the air. That's that light wispy stuff that I usually separate from the material that I use down in my wormery. Do we want to use a feeding zone indicator? We don't really do that in this bin, do we? We usually just take these coffee filters and rest them down in the feeding area to be supplementary bedding, or perhaps more just a carbon food source to go alongside the typical, you know, veggies and fruits that they're getting. Pretty nice generous feeding, which I think this bin could really use, you know, because it does have an estimated population that's pretty high. So I guess we kind of burried down deep to open up a spot to put the food, but I'd also like to check out these outer edges of the bin. Maybe dig down a little deep to see what's happening. The material all has all kinds of little peanut shells and sticks and branches and all kinds of stuff. I could see cocoon right there. It's pretty cool. So that suggests that they're pretty comfortable, I suppose, if they're breeding and preparing to spawn off the next generation in here already. Or maybe those are just cocoons that I brought over when I brought the worms over last time. It's hard to say. Some people have been suggesting, hey, don't put any more worms in this system. Next time you pull worms, get recruits out of the compost barrel, start a new system. So who knows, maybe next time we do that, we'll be out here to maybe recruit some more worms out of my compost barrel like we did last week. And maybe instead of dumping them in here, maybe we can start a new system. Alright, I think that a little boost to the bedding over there down the middle is going to help a lot. To me, this stuff just seems like it's very rich in like a lot of food substance, but maybe not in bedding as much. So I even thought about maybe dumping some leaves around the sides a little bit, but I think we're in good shape here. We're already pretty much covered up. I just wish I had some more leaves that we could scatter across the top, give this thing kind of a little bit more bedding boost right on top. You know, maybe I will go grab my empty box and fill it up with leaves from my leaf supply bag that's right there under the bush. So let me head over there now, and I'll be back in a few minutes with a whole box of leaves that we could dump right into here. So now when I was heading over there to pick up some more of these leaves to sprinkle across the top of this bin, I went right past my garden. I got to thinking, you know, there's a lot of worms in here and they didn't really get that much food. So I had a whole bunch of, you know, I was walking right past a section of the garden where I knew there was a whole bunch of fruit off of some of my plants that the storm had knocked over, and that I might as well add this to today's feeding, since what they got didn't seem like all that much, except this little guy here. I'm keeping this one. This thing looks so cool. So I thought that maybe just a little bit more food that we could just sprinkle across the top, right in the middle, maybe have like a huge burst of seedlings popping out over here. And these I won't burst. I burst all the tomatoes that we added earlier, but these we'll just leave them be. Maybe next time we'll come in here, and if they're not broken down yet or not infiltrated, we'll bust them up. But here I just wanted to dump in a little bit more food for these guys before we cover up with leaves. But that's it for this update. I hope these little guys appreciate all these fresh leaves coming on here. I think they will. And hopefully it rains soon and gives this stuff some moisture. But not much left to do here. All I got to do is get things covered up and a few things cleaned, but I'm not going to keep you around for that because that's boring. Before I go, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.